Welcome back to Gryphon's Film Fest, the show where I rate and review the movies I've seen in the last week or so. We got a great lineup today, so let's jump right into it. Started off with the new Final Destination film, and I walked away thoroughly fulfilled. Truth be told, I've only seen the first and third installment of the franchise before this, and came away from both extremely underwhelmed. I've just always found there to be a lack of weight in these movies. I never really care about the story or the characters, so all the deaths feel so few and far between as you have to suffer through the narrative tedium. But this one was really solid in that regard. I kinda cared about the people at stake here, and while the deaths are obviously more interesting than the story, this was the most serviceable a story has been in this franchise. That opening premonition scene, it's honestly a shame it's as good as it is, because it kinda makes the rest of the film feel like a step down in comparison. That could have just been a 10 or 15 minute short film and would have been a complete masterpiece. It's really easy to compare these to Saw, both long-running, gore-centered franchises, but there's a certain grit and seriousness that the Saw films have that I find lacking in Final Destination in general. It's a little too bubbly, a little too lighthearted, and it makes a lot of the deaths feel pretty weightless. Nevertheless, I had a lot of fun with this one and will totally be up there for the inevitable next entry. 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next I saw David Cronenberg's Cosmopolis starring Robert Pattinson, and I came away feeling pretty mixed on it. It follows Pattinson as a young billionaire who has to go across town in a stretch limo to get a haircut in the midst of a citywide riot. The entire film is essentially just a series of conversations in his limo, and sometimes in a restaurant, bar, etc. This thing is undeniably Cronenberg. Listen to the dialogue for 1 minute and you'll be sure, but his trademark style that works so well for something like The Shrouds, for instance, simply isn't as powerful when the narrative is so stripped back. So the movie's chugging along, and some of it is really interesting, some of it not so much, and we're wrapping it up now. There's about 15 minutes left, and then Paul Giamatti shows up. And the rest of the runtime is just a conversation between Pattinson and Giamatti, and it is instantly one of the best scenes I've ever watched in a movie. It's not like this feels totally dissimilar to the rest of the film. The scene is forged on the themes built up throughout the movie, but it's everyone working on the highest caliber to wrap up the story, and it is intense and powerful and elevates the material that came before it. After that last scene, I can't in good conscience think too negatively about this film. 3.5 out of 5 stars, very complicated movie. I'll come out and say it, The Hunt is a masterpiece for me. It follows Mads Mikkelsen as a kindergarten teacher who becomes socially exiled from his community after one of his students accuses him of committing a lewd act in front of her. For my money, this is perhaps the most intense I've ever felt watching a feature-length film. The emotional and physical wringer this movie puts Mads' character through is borderline sickening and is seriously so effective in hooking you and having you stay hooked. I understand the main criticism, that this entire narrative is pushing the idea that people frequently lie about being victims of sexual abuse, which is obviously a harmful message. But I think this film is more than just that, and it's not trying to push an agenda or anything, just trying to tell a very tragic, very human story. I urge you to watch this thing, but be ready to be completely destroyed. 5 out of 5 stars. The final reckoning is great, guys. I hate to break it to you. I get the complaints, I really do. The first 20 minutes are rough, globe-trotting in seconds, plot reveals being lackadaisically presented at a rapid speed, the pace itself just being really headache-inducing. Also, man, this franchise has a problem with character deaths, and it's weirdly the exact same problem Final Destination has. For both franchises, it often feels like deaths are more emotional for the audience than the characters themselves. There's never any grieving that carries over to the next film, or sometimes even the next scene. Multiple major character deaths in Mission Impossible movies aren't acknowledged by a majority of the crew, and it's just frustrating. And sad. I want to see Ethan really grapple with Ilsa's death in Dead Reckoning, but instead Grace functionally replaces her, and her name isn't even mentioned. This whole franchise is allegedly built around this found family, but I feel like the writers don't treat them that way sometimes. But once those initial qualms got out of the way, I was into the Final Reckoning, man. I think there's a certain level of prestige these films hold themselves to, a certain seriousness that is completely lacking here. Characters feel really cartoonish, plotlines kinda go nowhere. It's way less dense and convoluted than most Mission Impossible plots, and all these changes feel so different from the aesthetic that McQuarrie and Cruise have constructed since Rogue Nation, making it understandable why so many audiences are confused and dismayed. But I loved it, its cartoonishness, how silly it all got, and how Cruise and co took that silliness so seriously at every turn. And you know, the stunts are next level insane, obviously, the underwater sequence being one of the best things I've seen all year. What people don't talk about, however, is how stellarly this is directed in every scene. Even the most brain-rot exposition is directed with such classical Hollywood vigor, and it's rare to see that nowadays. Final Reckoning certainly isn't perfect, but I trusted Ethan one last time, and it paid off immensely. 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I watched Richard Linklater's Bernie, starring Jack Black, Shirley MacLaine, and Matthew McConaughey. I love Linklater to death, but somehow this wasn't really on my radar, and I am so glad to have found it. Bernie follows a beloved Texas mortician and church choir leader who befriends the universally hated Marjorie Nugent, who slowly starts to take over every second of his life. What follows is a comedy not afraid to go into some pretty dark territory, which I can always appreciate. It's pretty much a mockumentary, a creative choice which sometimes doesn't really lend itself to the story at hand here, and often feels like a way to pad out runtime. I honestly feel like we spend more time with these random Texas residents than McClane or McConaughey, which I found super frustrating. This isn't the case for Jack Black, however. As the title suggests, this is undoubtedly his movie, and the result is quite easily his best performance. He's able to capture this uber wholesome charm without it coming off like a caricature, making for such a nuanced and engaging character. Man, it's really hard for Linklater to make a bad movie for me, which is why I'm giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I finally got around to watching Terrifier 2, and it was pretty good. It starts off downright incredible, with the first 40 or so minutes being some of the most expertly directed horror I've seen in a long time. This film has a serious contender for the best nightmare sequence I've ever seen, seriously out of this world in surreality and tension. Even the opening credits are superb, gliding around Sienna's room with such care and precision with a truly phenomenal main theme to boot. And then it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps going for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I just don't care as much anymore. It squanders a lot of its good grace by just refusing to call it quits, and I end up feeling really exhausted. Also, this certainly looks a lot better than Terrifier 1, but whatever they filmed Terrifier 3 on certainly outclasses this in its warmth and texture. I still had a lot of fun, and the gore is seriously impressive. I just wish they knew how to restrain themselves a little more here. 3.5 out of 5 stars. Well, that's all I watched this week. Watch them for yourself and let me know what you think. This is Gryphon's Film Fest.